Hi, hello everybody. Welcome back to another Theory Thursday stream. I'm Gabby. I'm gonna be presenting to you today my Gabby, colleague, soldier, absolutely Mo. We're gonna be talking about mutual aid today. I've made us a little presentation on like the goals of mutual aid. You know, I touched on them a bit in the last presentation we did a couple of weeks ago. Um, but today we're kind of going to go a little bit more in depth on the nature of mutual aid, some of the risks that mutual aid efforts can fall into. We're going to do some reading on mutual aid theory and stuff too. I've got two particular articles that we're going to go through and read. Those will basically go more in depth on the ideas that I'm kind of describing here in this presentation. So I hope you guys are excited. So first off, what is mutual aid? Well, the definition of mutual aid is just a voluntary giving or lending of resources, labor, or goods to others in a shared community slash communities with the expectation that the entire community will in turn benefit. So basically, that is just any time that you offer some sort of resource or thing to another community or a community member, like whether that's, you know, sharing food or offering shelter or building infrastructure of any kind, really, with the intent of everybody having access to it. Those are all mutual aid efforts. More specific ones, you know, food distribution, which is one I commonly do. Another big one is free libraries, in which, if you aren't familiar, basically the idea of a library in which people can bring in and take out books as they please and read them and such, with the working kind of on like an honor system of people, you know, handing in books and then returning them and whatnot, and adding to the book collection. Other things can be clean needle processes where in which people that are have drug addictions can go to swap out their used needles for clean ones in order to help them stay away from getting infections and stuff, which is often very common with shared needles, just using dirty needles in general. So with that being said, what is the purpose of mutual aid? Well, most inherently so is the idea of being disruptive. And what we mean by being disruptive is ultimately resisting and overcoming the systems of oppression that we live in under capitalism. So basically, mutual aid efforts like food distribution, free libraries, and legal support funds can look like acts of charities on the surface, but they serve the greater purpose of solidarity. Mutual aid allows us to build community-wide networks of services separate from those sanctioned by the state. And when we say state here, obviously we're talking about the government as a whole, the systems in place as a whole, and not just like any given state, like in the United States, the state in the more socio-political sense. So we're going to build networks of services separate from those sanctioned by the state, so that those ignored and harmed by the systems of capital, queer folks, those in poverty, people of color, many others, can have the resources that they need to survive. So by uniting together to serve each other and help each other, we disrupt that system by no longer relying on it. And if we don't rely on it, we don't have to participate. And if we don't participate, capitalism falls, because we are literally, as the working class, the ones bolstering it and allowing it to continue and perpetuate. Because we do not have currently the resources to help ourselves, and therefore we need to rely on capitalism. And if we, be working and paying rent and relying on the owning class, the bourgeoisie, as they're most commonly called, relying on them to pay us and whatnot. So we're able to build this infrastructure, and there's all different kinds of infrastructure, and we'll get into kinds of work that we can do within mutual aid in a little bit. When we build this infrastructure, it is with the means of allowing us as a society, as a group, as a community, to not rely on privatized forms of that infrastructure. So a great example is community defense groups and community crisis groups, people that are members of the community that are trained and specialized in preventing or helping those in need in a crisis. So let's say there was there's a domestic violence issue going on in a particular household. A crisis group within the community could work towards helping those that are in danger and giving them the proper care and security that they need in order to escape that domestic house, that violent house hold, or just escape the domestic violence in general, right? Whereas currently, people in those situations tend to have to rely on the police, who can oftentimes make things even more dangerous, or by outright ignoring the issue and preventing that person from being safe and secure, dismissing the issue, by suggesting that maybe it's not an issue at all, and maybe that the victim is the one to blame, et cetera, et cetera. Or, as we often see, police are very quick to escalate an issue, which will oftentimes result in the unjustifiable murders of people of color, queer people, houseless people, people with neurodivergencies or some other mental health issue. All of those people are targeted and put at danger when police get involved. And so a community-led defense group or a community crisis group serves to eliminate the need for the police in order to save lives, essentially. Sorry, that was a lot. I was talking a lot. Sorry. Moving on to the next slide. So we are focused on not relying on reform. And what I mean by that is reform in the sense of political reform within the framework of the government, right? So not relying on voting for a representative that you can maybe then convince to vote in your favor, in your interest, for legislation. That is what the state would want you to do. They want you to sit there and vote and just hope that they decide to resolve a problem for you. But I think, as we can tell from like the recent cancellation of Roe v. Wade and many and all of the anti-trans legislation that's been going about for the past like 5 years, representatives do not have your best interest at heart. They serve capital. They serve themselves. So rather than calling for action from the state and these representatives, mutual aid serves to reclaim that power back to the people that are actually, bolstering the system or the society as a whole. So instead of waiting for a new soup kitchen to maybe possibly get built after a delegation of white elites decides whether or not deserve a soup kitchen, a community can share their access to food, and they can maybe even use a church or a sports center or some other community center that already exists to house like a food cabinet or something, so that people have better access to their needs. And I also wanted to point out that in just the past 2 years, the state of Texas has banned over 800 books, and they all deal with critical leftist thought that criticizes capitalism and the government, BIPOC history and culture, detailing like the history and culture of Black, Indigenous people of color. Also, a lot of stuff on Black Panthers and other Black revolutionary thought and leaders, and just queer identity in general. So discussing being trans, being homosexual, etc. Um, all of these kinds of books have been banned from Texas. Some books banned twice, like in a row, somehow double banned, if you would. So a mutual aid collective could establish a free library to allow people access to this kind of reading material so that they can learn without being intervened by fascism, right? Because that's what all of that is. That's all fascist efforts to downplay and hide these aspects of the world that we live in, so that people don't get the wrong ideas, quote unquote, wrong ideas. Right. So we're fascism is trying to smother dissent and disobedience by banning this kind of knowledge. So moving on, what can we do then if we're not relying on reform? So we're going to talk about the different kinds of work that you can do. These are bottom-up tactics and strategies in order to build community and establish mutual aid efforts. Because to work together wholly is to resist against capitalism, and mutual aid relies on many kinds of work to foster this kind of community. So the first thing that we can do is just pretty common, is we can work to stop the expansion of harmful systems. This can be stuff like stopping police from sweeping houseless camps. We can stop harmful destruction or harmful construction of like highways and stuff that would otherwise destabilize existing neighborhoods. Stuff like what's the word I'm looking for? Oh God, the word used to describe when wealthy white people move into neighborhoods and raise rent so that people of color living in that neighborhood already are forced to move out because they can't afford the new rent prices. Gentrification, right? So we can work to stop the expansion of harmful systems like stopping police from sweeping houseless camps, gentrification of neighborhoods, of pre-existing neighborhoods and stuff like that. We can also work to directly provide for people, food distribution, food pantries, legal counsel funds, stuff like that. Anything that would just directly provide resources to people immediately, right? And that things that the entire community has access to by accessing these funds and resources. Or we can work, as I've been saying, to build alternative infrastructure like libraries, childcare collectives, for parents that need to work multiple jobs currently, right? Like they can bring their children to a childcare collective in order to make sure that they're okay and that they're safe while they're working. Community defense groups and crisis response groups, like I've already mentioned. All of these are ways that we can prevent having to rely on capitalism as a whole, right? By working together as a group and community, and establishing relationships with other communities that are also providing these resources to themselves. All of this is an effort to build from the ground up, right? Because if we rely on the top down, we run into a problem that I was going to speak on here, this slide, co-optation, which we'll be reading more about in some of our reading. So we want to disobey rather than dissent. Dissent does not go far enough. We have to actively work against the system that we're currently under. So mutual aid efforts can run the risk of dissolving into charity work if they're not careful. And what I mean by that is the state would rather citizens dissent through sanctioned events and policies, like voting, which I mentioned earlier, writing letters, posting on social media, maybe even marching in the street, if you're not disrupting the flow of traffic, and you've got cops on all sides, and there's no, we're not saying the wrong things, right? We're not making too much of a scene, then maybe we'll let you march, right? And this includes stuff like privatized charity, where like nonprofits serve to hoard their own wealth and pretend like they care about a given cause, but really nonprofits are just a fucking state sanctioned tax evasion, right? It's literally just money laundering after a point. They're not going to really work in the interest of those in need that they say that they're trying to help, because if they did that, then they would no longer exist, and they would not be able to hoard their wealth like that. So nonprofits serve to perpetuate themselves indefinitely, which is why private charity does not work as a way of helping others, right? So disrupting and building alternatives to capitalist society serves to disobey, because we can't operate under the moral frameworks these groups used to use to determine who, like, quote, deserves help, right? Stuff like curfews. Hold on a second. Okay. I'm back. Hello. Sorry. Somebody was at the door. Um, so stuff like, checking for warrants, sobriety requirements, working with the police requirements, all of these things that, or, having to be like of a specific faith, in order to receive help. All of these things are, ways that the state tries to determine who, or tries to, doesn't not determine, all of these serve as ways for the state to um, perpetuate its moral framework that it deems as okay for people to do, and things that things are not okay for people to do, right? So it's a great way of keeping people of color and LGBTQIA plus people out of certain services. Great way of keeping houseless people from receiving help. Fun fact: FEMA requires you to have a to confirm a mailing address before you can receive help. And I don't know if you know a lot about people that are houseless, but they don't have that, and they suffer just as much, if not worse, from natural disasters compared to other people. So not good, not good at all. And you know, one of the biggest things that mutual aid, you know, has to make sure that it is doing in order to be effective is that it's not putting the community at risk, right, of intervention or being harmed. So, you know, mutual aid doesn't talk to the police. It doesn't rely on private funding. And it definitely doesn't operate within the boundaries of the law, because feeding the homeless, or houseless, feeding the houseless, going out and protesting in many states is just straight up illegal. You know, and if it's not necessarily illegal, it's enough for, you know, other things related to those things are illegal, which will allow the police carte blanche to just fuck with you and harm the people that you're trying to help. So it's important to keep that in mind when performing mutual aid. If you're having to talk to the cops in order to like help somebody, like help a community, you're just not doing it right. Okay, so that is the slides that I have prepared today. We can move on to some greater reading, which we will go ahead and do. So today we're going to be reading Insurrectionary Mutual Aid by Curious George Brigade. This is from Mobilizations to Insurrection Mutual Aid, the advantages of Insurrection Mutual Aid. Parts. Yeah, these are parts of the thing. This is, as always, available on the anarchistlibrary.org website. Great resource for further reading. This is from 2009. Okay. From mobilizations to insurrectionary mutual aid. While too many anarchists wring their hands about the end of the rollicking anti-globalization mobilizations of the last decade, others are conspiring a resistance of direct action in places where we have a chance to win. The truth is that while we learned many valuable organizational and tactical lessons during the years after Seattle, most of our energy was spent on largely symbolic actions. The real strength of these mobilizations was mutually in the organizing, the ability to awaken many people to the possibility of resistance to global capitalism, as well as providing a catalyst for regional and international networks. At no point did these mobilizations actually threaten to end world capitalism or seriously challenge state power, or even liberate any socio-geographical territory. As anarchists, now is not the time to mourn the death of anti-globe mobilizations, but to move to the next phase of our resistance, insurrectory mutual aid. Insurrection, definition, an organized rebellion aimed at overthrowing a constituted government through the use of subversion, sabotage, and direct resistance, calling in question the legitimacy and efficacy of the government. So, in short, using direct means of criticizing and countering against the government and its efforts. It is through acting and learning to act that we will open a path to insurrection. Propaganda does have a role, but that role is limited to clarifying actions, not inciting them, since its context is dependent on the actions of people. Simply put, waiting only teaches waiting. In acting, one learns to act. The force of insurrection is not the state's military response, but the social upheaval it generates. Beyond the surface of the armed clash, the importance of any particular revolt should be evaluated by how it managed to expand the paralysis of normality in a given area and beyond. The Zapatistas are a recent example of this. A limited military clash, less than 10 days long and 150 people killed, with the government at San Cristobal on New Year's Day 1994, was an example of insurrection. It was a success not because of a stunning military victory, but because it was able to disrupt normality in Chiapas, which is still going on to this day. Recently, the Zapatistas have used this base in Chiapas to launch a new challenge to the legitimacy of the Mexican state and have expanded beyond Chiapas. Okay, we look up Zapatistas. Army of National Liberation. Go to Wikipedia real quick. Wait, what was that? Oh, it's the Guardian. Yeah, go figure. Zapatista Army of National Liberation, far left political and militant group that controls a substantial amount of territory in Chiapas, the southernmost state of Mexico. It has been nominally at war with the Mexican state. Right at this point is a frozen conflict. EZLN used a strategy of civil resistance, form of political action that relies on the use of nonviolent resistance by ordinary people to challenge a particular power, force, policy, or regime. Zapatista's main body is made up of mostly rural and indigenous people, but it includes some supporters in urban areas and internationally. EZLN's main spokesperson is Subcommandant Insurgent Galeano, previously known as Subcommandant Marcos, aka Compañero Galeano, and Delegate Zero in relation to the other campaign. Program by the for the action of indigenous. Okay, unlike other Zapatista spokespeople, Marcos is not an indigenous Maya. Takes name from themselves as a decentralized organization, pseudonymous, not Marcos, widely considered, despite his claims that the group leader, political decisions are deliberated and military and organizational matters are decided by the Zapatista area elders who compose the general command. Okay. So it wasn't necessarily about the physical victory that a military conflict has, but rather how much are you able to actually inspire change within a given movement, right? That's what actually determines the success, because that's what's going to determine its growth. Is like, okay, cool, you like, cool, a bunch of leftists fought some cops in the street one day, but did they actually incite people to like go out and not rely on the cops in that area? Is there like is there a proper crisis response group now? Are there community members there that are solving community conflicts rather than the police? Like, it doesn't matter if you just like bothered the cops a little bit. Like, if you're not doing something productive within that community, it's not going to be super helpful. So that kind of expands to what this person's talking about. Sorry, I ate not too long ago, so hard to breathe. Y'all let me know if you need me to like slow down or anything, or if you guys have questions, just, you know, hit me as we get there. It is the potential expansion that gives an insurrection its power and drives the fear behind the state's reaction. In a crisis or emergency situation, fortune favors the rebel, since crises are by nature, if only temporarily, beyond the control of government forces. Governments have numerous contingencies to deal with a variety of, quote, acceptable variations, actual term used in FEMA documents. However, they lack imagination, and the lumbering bureaucracy that dominates all governments make it difficult to react to new situations. If it falls outside their imaginations, they are at a loss to improvise. It can be a short step from emergency to the emergence of self-organized resistance. Argentina is one recent example of how an economic crisis can transform itself into a real counterforce to capitalism and the state. Okay. Okay, so it's essentially saying finding ways to counteract and work against the government's efforts is one of the best. Hold on. Let's see. All right. So okay. If you can find ways to counteract against the way that the government is operating, and you can do that continuously, and like perpetually keep changing your strategies up enough. Oh shit. Thanks, Froth. Thank you for the fucking 2-month sub. Appreciate you. I am your favorite streamer. Oh, ooh. We're talking about mutual aid. We're discussing mutual aid and anarchism. So I hope you stick around. Okay. So mutual aid, a voluntary giving or lending of resources, labor, or goods to others in a shared community or community. The expectation that the entire community will in turn benefit. So that's the definition I used earlier. Mutual aid is a concept that is familiar to many anarchists, but often not fully understood. Mutual aid is not charity, nor is it some Baroque bartering system. It rejects the tit-for-tat psychology of modern capitalism while challenging the nightmare of communist distribution. Mutual aid is freely given help in the form of services and resources to others in our community. The idea is that as individuals in the community help each other, the entire community benefits and that in turn supports the individual's own goals. It is not dissimilar to the simple concept of sharing. Mutual aid, like charity, central communism, and capitalism, promotes a specific ideological system. In the case of mutual aid, it supports a libertarian ideology where individuals are trusted to make economic decisions that promote the entire community. The state and its flunkies work from me when trust. So true. Literally just like trusting your fellow man. It's crazy. What a revolutionary idea. Just like literally trusting people. It's amazing, like just how like capitalist society just like, yeah, don't trust your fellow person. Don't trust your community. Don't trust your neighbor. Trust in brand. Please trust brand. Trust brand. Brand give you so much food, water for high price, egg $5. Egg. That's capitalism, basically. The state and its flunkies work from a position that charity is an effective tool to reestablish the status quo. In its most recent report on Katrina, FEMA summarized the state's logic on providing assistance to affected people. All aid should be used strategically. The use of sustainable supplies must be administered in such a way to maximize compliance with the emergency plan. Fortunately, this may delay some aid. The primacy of maintaining control in the first few days cannot be underestimated. This may delay some aid, but the primacy of maintaining control in the first few days cannot be underestimated. It comes as no surprise that our leaders are willing to let us die while they implement their misguided plans to maintain law and order. It is during this period of government hesitation that we need to be on the ground providing real solidarity for those the state is afraid of and indifferent to. Solidarity is more than holding protests, organizing fundraisers, and filing indie media reports. Real solidarity requires commitment, risk, and preparedness. Mutual aid is a direct challenge to the government. I'm going to eat the rich and the poor. I'm hungry. No eating poor people. Mutual aid is a direct challenge to the government and the associated NGOs, that's non-government organizations, and religious institutions that monopolize helping people. Mutual aid, by necessity, promotes an egalitarian relationship between individuals and groups, where charity and government aid have buttressed hierarchical relationships of dependence, at best, and oppression, more often. Through the solidarity of mutual aid, we can show our commitment to those excluded by the government emergency managers and truly reclaim the tactic of propaganda by the deed. So, this is kind of going over what I was talking about earlier in the presentation, where mutual aid and charity are not the same thing. Charity is very often a neoliberal tax evasion scheme focused around not like nonprofits hoarding their wealth and doing like a little bit, but obviously not enough to actually fix the problem. Because if they fixed the problem, then they would no longer exist and they would no longer be able to hoard that wealth for themselves. Stuff like what is it, Susan B. Komen or whatever, being like a really shitty org because it's about cancer quote awareness and not actually like providing funds in order to properly like find a solution to cancer through medical research. It's just about the pink ribbon and why instead of going to spend that money on people. Yeah, precisely. In brackets, that's absolutely true. Instead of going to some big charity, just spend the money on people you know who need help. Absolutely. That is what mutual aid seeks to do, is working within the community, not to just like when I go to a food distribution and I'm handing out food to the houseless, it's not about like, oh, we're just going to give them food and leave. It's about building that trust within that community of houseless people so that we can work towards finding like housing and helping with other needs that they have. Like there's a couple of people at a camp that I go to that need state IDs in order to use public services and shit, because a lot of public services require your state ID. But if you could imagine being houseless, it's kind of hard to fucking do that. And especially with all the funds that sort of thing fucking requires. Like, I don't know when the last time y'all have been to like the DMV or something, but just getting like your license registered or re-registered, even if you already have it, it's like a couple $100 typically in just fees, not to mention the time you have to spend sitting and waiting and everything, right? Oh geez. Oh, hey, thank you for the sub, Morticia R Savant 6, but we'll say Savant. I'm Morticia R S 6. Thank you for the sub. Oh, hey Helga, hi. Thank you for the sub, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for making it to the stream. All right. I don't know why it changed to another count. I don't know. Weird. Oh well. So, oh god. Right. So these private organizations, you know, they're working to perpetuate themselves. And when I go to a houseless camp, you know, I'm working with people. I'm working with people to build trust in that community so that they can like provide us with like, hey, when's the next sweep going to happen, so we can come in and like, if not prevent it, at least make sure, like, hold cops accountable and like make sure that nobody is like hurt, and at least help them move, like, right, because like, and so people don't lose all of their stuff. That's one of the things that we're trying to do with the various houseless camps that my friends and I go to, is building that community, building that network between. And that's what most, if not all, mutual aid efforts should be working towards doing, is building that community. So to continue down with the article here, however, to be effective, we need to prepare now. The influx of supplies and labor to locally affected communities that we share affinity with could mean the difference between the streets. Oh, thank you for the sub again, brackets, or maybe that's just a late notification. That we share affinity with could mean the difference between the streets of Argentina and the stadiums of Louisiana. We must be prepared. This must be a reference to an economic crisis that not an economic, but ecological issue that I'm not really privy to. Stadiums of Louisiana, I believe, is referencing back to Katrina. We must be prepared if a crisis happens tomorrow. A crisis is not the time to have fundraisers to get initial supplies. We need to be working on getting these things now, so when an emergency occurs, we can act immediately. Basically, you know, it kind of just basically says like, hey, rather than like waiting until a problem actually arises. We need to have these mutual aid efforts set up beforehand so that we can operate effectively when shit does hit the fan, right? Showing up during a crisis is not like summit hopping. Any insurrectionist needs to be self-sufficient, the basics, and have ready access to extra supplies of food, water, medications, power, communications, and shelter. It should be obvious in emergency situations one cannot simply arrive and expect to plug in to an already organized network. Unprepared radicals can actually put a strain on scarce resources by showing up unprepared. Hundreds of well-intentioned college kids flooded New Orleans during their spring break. It did not turn out to be the boon organizers first had hoped for. Students came without adequate clothes, food, water, shelter, and so on. One organizer spent an entire afternoon tracking down some medication for a student who had assumed they could get important prescriptions filled at a local drugstore. Organizers were swamped with the logistics of supporting these hundreds of volunteers and organizing them to do meaningful and much needed work. The Food Not Bombs people provide a positive example on how groups of people can organize themselves and be adequately prepared enough so the focus can be on the work that needs to be done. In the weeks following the hurricane, more than 100 Food Not Bomb and related volunteers served thousands of meals to those in need. They had their own shelter, communications, and supplies. Local communities did not need to waste limited energy and resources on these volunteers. So basically this is saying, like, hey, if you're going to go out to a houseless distribution, or if you're going to be out, for several hours in the day working, be ready to do that. If you're going to be for multiple days, pack accordingly, right? If you're going to be, if you're not sure if you're going to be able to have a place to stay during that thing, like, you figure out that, bring a tent or something, like, because otherwise you're just going to make the logistics even harder, right? Especially for these big projects like Food Not Bombs. Intent is only like half of the actual effort you have to put in, right? That's the big thing. Like you can be well intentioned and then still fuck up. It's fine, but you have to learn from that lesson. An insurrectionary must also be prepared to deal with real risk. Anti-globalization mobilizations did a good job of training and preparing us for possible arrests and police brutality. Even though the majority of protesters were never arrested or beaten with billy clubs, the very real possibility of state violence allowed one to decide what levels of risk one was willing to engage in with their affinity groups. We need to be just as honest and talk with those in our affinity groups about what level of risk we are willing to criticize. We are willing to crisis mobilizations. During emergencies, all sorts of laws change, and the rest of arrests are greatly heightened along with real violence from the state and others. Real solidarity is taking similar risks as those most affected, not just sitting on the sidelines wishing them luck. Insurrectionary mutual aid is difficult, high-risk activity that requires a substantial number of resources and preparedness. It is reasonable to ask if these tactics are worth it. As anarchists, the revolution is our constant point of reference, precisely because it is a concrete event. It must be built daily through more modest attempts which do not have all the liberating characteristics of the social revolution in the true sense. These more modest attempts are insurrections. In them, the uprising of the most exploited and excluded society and the most politically sensitized minority opens the way to the possible involvement of increasingly wider strata exploited on a flux of rebellion, which could lead to revolution. It is never possible to see the outcome limited and circumscribed. Revolution can never be guaranteed in advance by any method. Below are some advantages and difficulties involved in practicing insurrectionary mutual aid. Advantages. Crisis allows us to refocus and put our energies back into direct action. Connects us with folks that may have never heard about anarchism. Challenge the state and the capitalists on a more even playing field. Allow us to test out our assumptions about how societies can be organized along anarchist principles. Reinvigorate our anarchist networks by coming together for crisis mobilizations. Provide more permanent socio-geographic areas for further resistance. Access to public exposure. Fighting for something instead of against things. Learn a new skill that may be more appropriate for widespread militant resistance. Okay, so a lot of these are in the context of like a natural disaster and stuff, which I mean I understand. These are advantages in that sense. So basically, like, under the assumption that a natural disaster is being covered by the media, you will have access to public exposure on top of the people in the local area that you're actually helping obviously be exposed to you and stuff. Which, again, if they've never even heard about anarchism, great way to bring it up, I guess. Or rather, they'll have questions to talk about it. More even playing field, I guess, meaning that the the state and capitalists are not going to be able to rely on pre-existing systems like the police and such as easily during a natural disaster like Katrina. Allows us to test our assumptions about how societies can be organized along anarchist principles, essentially being like, if major infrastructure is being destroyed, groups and temporary, like, it maybe possibly temporary communities are going to be established by way of like necessity, right? Like if you're working together for mutual aid during a crisis event, it's going to be like you're going to be working together, bonding, and trying to organize and follow these principles. And that's it's a good way to say, like, okay, can this work during a crisis event? And if it does, it that's awesome. Okay, cool. And then fighting for something instead of against things, meaning essentially like instead of directly going against like a capitalist system, a harmful aspect of the capitalist system, you're working towards something by helping all these people. Difficulty. The stakes are much higher. People could get into serious trouble. Events are spontaneous as opposed to scheduled events, so it's harder to plan for. Requires greater mobility. Requires decisiveness. There's often only a small window of opportunity. Greater demand on a functioning internetwork communication system. Insurrectionaries need to develop a real-time, multiple redundant communication system beyond just the internet. Often requires complex logistics. Means working in areas that may have entrenched and baroque internal interests in politics, which we may know very little about. Greater need for self-sufficiency. Mutual aid is not charity, it is an attack. That's a good line. Line goes hard as fuck. Holly. I think all those were pretty clear. We also have this much longer one, but this is essentially just this is where I got a lot of my discussion points for the slideshow here. Helga, since you just got here, we're gonna kind of I'm gonna go ahead and do the slideshow again, just a bit. Don't miss anything. So, broad strokes, what is mutual aid? It's a voluntary giving or lending of resources, labor, or goods to others in a shared community/communities with the expectation that the entire community will in turn benefit. Oh my God, it's Hershey. Hi, Hershey. Welcome to the stream. Good to see you, friend. We're going over anarchism, specifically mutual aid. What is it? What's the purpose? Why do we do it? What are some of the dangers of mutual aid efforts? So the main purpose of mutual aid is to be disruptive, right? So what do I mean by being disruptive? I mean resisting and overcoming systems of oppression that we live in under capitalism, right? And the purpose of disrupting the system is to no longer rely on it. So when we do things like distributing food, setting up free libraries and legal support funds that the entire community can access, that's a mean of no longer having to rely on the pre-established state-sanctioned infrastructure, right? And if you don't have to rely on the system in order to participate in society, hey, Narvit, you've been here since the beginning of the stream? Oh, my bad, Fisha. Well, Narvit's been gone, and I don't think Hershey's been here, so we can go over it anyway. It's fine. Sorry, for people watching the VOD, which I don't have chat for. There are people. My students are late, essentially. Um, so, oh, Rainbow, thank you, Nerf. Um, so fine, right, not relying on on pre-established state-sanctioned infrastructure. Because as we'll get into in a little bit, state-sanctioned infrastructure builds up a reliance on reform, and that's not what we want. We want to not have to rely on the state at all, and we want to build up our own support networks. So and we want to do that in order to build up solidarity. And solidarity is meant to essentially mean that mutual aid allows us to build community-wide networks of services separate from those sanctioned by the state, so that those ignored and harmed by the systems of capital, which are queer folks, people in poverty, people of color, many other people too, including people with neurodivergencies and physical disabilities. This is so that they can have the resources that they need to survive, right? And as I said, if we do not rely on capitalism, we do not have to participate. And if we do not participate, capitalism will fail, because we as the working class are what uphold and keep capitalism going. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Make sure you guys stop me if you ever have any questions or if you need me to talk about a topic again. So we do not want to rely on reform, like I said before. Our representatives in the state capitals and then in Washington D.C. Would very much like it if we just sat down and voted and wrote into the editor, or had a neat little protest or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, they don't have our best interests at heart. And I think nothing speaks better to that, truer to that, than the recent cancellation of Roe v. Wade, right? Which is an absolute travesty to people's reproductive rights and their privacy. So rather than calling for action from the state, mutual aid serves to reclaim that power. So instead of waiting for a new soup kitchen to be built, communities can share their access to food. Maybe they can use a church or a sports center to house a food cabinet. Maybe they can create a free library, because again, in the past 2 years, Texas has banned over 800 books, and most of that deals with critical leftist thought, BIPOC history and culture, stuff as relating to queer identity and queer identity politics, all of these things. So a mutual aid collective could establish a free library in order to make sure people have access to that kind of information, and that they can learn without being constantly worried of a fascist intervention, right? All of these are ways that we can not have to rely on political reform, and instead resist the system that we live in. Some tactics that we can work with through mutual aid is essentially different kinds of work. So we can work to stop the expansion of harmful systems, like stopping police from sweeping houseless camps, stuff like housing strikes and protests. These are all forms of aid that are directly stopping and working to prevent systems. We can work to directly provide for people, such as the food distributions, food pantries that I've mentioned before. And we can work to build alternative infrastructure, like with libraries, childcare collectives, community defense groups, and crisis response groups. I've talked about these a few times in the past, and also in the stream. What I mean by crisis response groups and community defense groups. So people that within the community that are trained and specialized in handling different kinds of crises within the community. Great example being people that can help secure and protect a person within a domestic abuse scenario, and then people that can patrol communities without us having to rely on police, because police tend to escalate or outright dismiss problems, and that puts people in the community at risk. So the less that we can rely on the police intervention for things that they are unequipped for, the better. So we want to resist reform, and we want to disobey rather than just dissenting. As I mentioned before, state would rather have you dissent through sanctioned events and policies that they deem appropriate. Stuff like, writing letters, posting on social media, and maybe marching in the streets if you don't affect the flow of traffic, and you're constantly surrounded by cops who could harm you at any given point. This includes things like privatized charity, where nonprofits serve to hoard wealth while pretending to care about a given cause. A nonprofit will never work in the interests of those in need because it serves to perpetuate itself indefinitely. You can put money into Susan B. Komen, but as long as Susan B. Komen only wants to make people, quote, aware of cancer research, it's not going to do anything. Even just putting money into cancer research isn't going to do much, right? Because you're going to only put in as much as you need to in order to not pay taxes that year. So, big thing is charity is not the same as solidarity. So by disrupting and building alternatives to capitalism, we serve to disobey. We can't operate under the moral frameworks that these groups use to determine who, quote, deserve help. Stuff like curfews, laws, policies against people with drug addiction, people with sobriety issues, et cetera, making people be of a certain faith before they can get help from a specific organization. All of those serve to uphold Puritan morality clauses in order to prevent everybody from getting help. So anarchism serves to provide aid to everybody, regardless of things like, if they have a criminal record, if they have a drug problem, if they are neurodivergent, if they have a physical disability, if they're of a specific faith or identity. All of these things are not important. And mutual aid cannot put the community at risk. That is a big thing. So mutual aid does not talk to the cops. It doesn't rely on privatized funding from private companies. And it doesn't operate within the boundaries of the state's laws, right? So when we go out and we're, when we talk about, going out and feeding the houseless, that is a crime. Feeding the houseless, if it's not already illegal, the police will make it seem like it's illegal when they approach you. Things like, protesting, all of these things are all of these are things that the state does not want you to do because it directly works against them. So I would say that, it's anarchism is not meant to work within the boundaries, within the frameworks of the law, right? It's just not going to work. If you try to establish anarchism via while also doing it 100% legally, it's just not good. Narbit says, "Oh boy, I got approached by cops once while hanging out with some homeless dudes near my old apartment complex. The cops were real dicks, told me to get off the sidewalk when technically I was already on my apartment's property." Just a great example of just cops are pieces of shit. They will bother you just to do it. They don't care. Right? So, it's just so frustrating. They sent the cops in to do a houseless sweep of the camp because they're doing expansion stuff on the highway in that specific spot. And a bunch of people got sent to a transitionary home shelter, essentially, which does not provide for them very well. I think it's technically a roof over their heads, but it's a shitty building. And it doesn't have enough room for everybody. So anybody that didn't come with, just had to move on to the next camp. It's just really unfortunate. So, these are some of the dangers that mutual aid can run the risk of. If you if you're talking to the cops, if you're setting boundaries for like, oh, what people like, what kind of people, quote unquote, that you're allowing into the mutual aid funds and projects, then you're not doing mutual aid. There's not a community that you're building. You're not building an egalitarian community. There, it's not a good project. You got to stop. Right. So it's just really. So we're running towards the kind of end of the presentation, as it were. So I guess I will take this time for questions, elaborations if anybody would like one. If anybody has a story to tell, we can discuss it. I will also be in the general chat for on the Discord server if you would like to come in and discuss something on stream. That would be great. Would love to have people on. We can also take a look at mutual aid efforts in your area. If anybody wants to give me like a city or a state, we can talk about that. I would love to see what's in people's areas. Pause for questions. Have I ever looked at red bread in places like LA? No, I haven't. Let's take a look at that. Red bread. Red bread. Require 5 days notice or a rush fee must be added at checkout. Read FAQs carefully to understand pickup location. Doesn't look like. Local whole grains, not too sweet, fruit and flowers forever. How does red bread make its bread? Big all grain from grist and toll in Pasadena and pick a choppy green product. Red bread uses only the highest quality ingredients to ensure excellent taste and nutrition. All its handcrafted breads and treats. Is this? Oh, it's not it. Okay, I was wondering, like, is this? What is this? What did you? I see, because it's like it's red and it's like it's got stars. Like, okay, maybe it's like a leftism thing. I don't know. Hold on. Red bread, Los Angeles. Leftism. Yo, dag, yo, can't find anymore. God damn it, Narbit. What is this? What did you make me find? Let's see. I don't think this. All right. Well, that wasn't it. This is a history of Kropotkin and his mutual aid theory. In general, also a good resource, I would say. Kind of long, a lot of sources though. Fix. F. Aid. Against self-sufficiency? Reading through this article real quick. Don't even know if you don't know even a tenth of them since the day either you or they were born. It is not a community. Don't know even a tenth of them. That's I don't agree with that. What the fuck is this article? Ugh, I don't like it. Hmm. COVID-19 did provide a pretty interesting time for me. That's another great opportunity for people to do the insurrectionary mutual aid that we've been discussing before. Let's see. Some of the aid offered by COVID-19 mutual aid groups is not antagonistic to the logic of capital, just shopping on behalf of other people. Indeed, whether such activity even deserves the name mutual aid is, in my opinion, an open, if boring question. After all, capital still has hold of what we need to survive, and we are still paying for it with the pittance they have yet stolen from us, even if someone else hands over the money to the merchant. Indeed, in a glowing endorsement of our efforts, ASDA are rolling out a volunteer card that will make it easier, rather than harder, for us to offer. Some COVID-19 mutual aid groups are at least aiming beyond the limits of commodity exchange. Within my local group, we've begun to see small-scale acts of direct economic redistribution and limited free provision of essential supplies. Elsewhere, mutual aid networks have mobilized to defend tenants from the evictions that we were told would not be happening. In my mind, the pressing question is how to extend and intensify this tendency. More specifically, how can these new mutual aid groups promote the decommodification of the things we need to live and thrive. Actually, great thing just reminded me of things like housing and rent strikes are mutual aid. Communities of neighbors in an apartment building working together to not pay rent in order to get their land in order to prevent their landlord from evicting them is POG, to say the least. And is shows a great example of building community with one another in order to benefit the whole. Or hold on. Sorry, Norbert was showing me red bread people he was talking about. It's a food distribution effort in LA. Hold on. I'm kind of hesitant to show this link. Actually, now I think about it, that's my that's my Twitter account. A different Twitter account. So let me not look. Hold on. Give me a second. All right, there we go. I can show it now. We were out again last week at our red bread distro. All right, LA Socialist SRA. Okay. Cool. So this is people focused a lot on community defense and teaching self-defense and stuff, obviously. Having range days and stuff. Pretty cool. SRA is usually fine. Just gotta be careful of like MLs and shit. Let's see, have you seen this photo? Do you know what books are being burned? I can probably guess. Yes. Not know the context. The Nazis are burning texts from a revolutionary medical clinic for LGBT research where transgender patients could get treatment. Yes, I remember that. I mean, I don't remember being there. I remember reading about it, rather. Okay, cool. So, Los Angeles has an SRA. That's cool. Do you have any branches? Let's see. National website, right? Well, the is kind of all over. Let's see. Remember? Oof. I forgot they also have membership. Usually you can get those waves. You're good. Gabby Colley isn't immortal. I'm immortal? When did that happen? God, I hope so. That'd be pog. This is what the kids call based. So true. So true. I hate cops. All right. Cool. So I guess if nobody has any questions or anybody wants to know where their local mutual aid stuff is. Oh, my back. we can go ahead and call it there. Thank you so much, guys, for checking out the stream. Really appreciate you guys as always. Oh, thank you, Narbit, for the 10 treats. I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Big ones. Oh. There we go. Perfect. Which do this topic? Yeah, absolutely, no problem. What topic do you guys want me to do next week? Next Thursday? What do you guys want to see? I can pretty much do just about any topic. We can just kind of discuss anything. So what do you guys want to see? What do you guys want to see next? I'll also be happy to take any feedback too, like what I did wrong, what you'd like to see more of, etc., etc. Pausing for feedback. I'll think about it and then text you. I need to learn Anarchism. Yeah, sure, no problem. No problem, Helga. All right, everybody. You all have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you guys have a good night. And I hope you guys find. Shut up, advertisement. Jesus, advertisement talking over me. God damn. Good night. Good night. Hope everybody has a great day. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.